that, in fact, putting out a lot of cheap money with very low interest rates may be creating bubbles that we are going to have to face later on as we come out of the pandemic. Do you agree? Do you think that we now got a lot of bubbles of money?
In the long term, income inequality depends on structural issues. Depends on the access to education. It depends to the actual access to health. It depends on the structure of the markets. It depends if there is an adequate governance and the legal system in a country. That's something where central banks cannot act, and we don't have an instrument to act there, and we shouldn't. We should in our annual economic report that we just published. Is that if the central bank implements monetary policy actions that pursue their objectives that have been assigned by society, the income distribution impact is less than if they hadn't acted. So let me give you an example. Given the pandemic, the economy of many of the world, of the global economy, in animated suspension, to pursue a health objective. Now, given that this generated a huge collapse in economic activity, central banks use their instruments to try to make it easier for firms to survive, and whatever activity was possible, to reignite it as fast as possible. No? So, of course, monetary policy acts through interest rates. So for that, interest rates needed to be reduced, and that has an income distribution impact. But imagine what would have happened if the central banks hadn't acted in the first place. The consequence of the lockdown and the recession would be even worse, and the income distribution impact would have been even worse. So the point that we make is that when the central bank is pursuing its ultimate objective, which is to stabilize the economy, to help abate unemployment, to keep inflation under control, to keep financial stability, even in the short term, if there is income distributions impact, is much better if it wouldn't have acted.
So you're saying essentially that it's kind of like an unfortunate side effect that happened, that there is this increased inequality, but it's still worth it, is what you're saying. The other option of not having pumped the money in is even worse.
Absolutely. You got it right.
How then, though, going forward, how to bring that inequality, narrow it again, and that we don't end up in a permanent trap of very, very poor people who are in a really unfortunate circumstance where they haven't been to school now for a year plus, they haven't had a job for a year plus, and then we have an accumulation of some people who may in fact have made lots of money or doing very, very well out of this terrible pandemic. How is it we make sure that we don't make this a permanent situation, that the side effect ends up being a very nasty thing that ends up being a real sickness?
Well, of course, number one is to continue in this quest to really bring the pandemic under control through vaccination. Number two is to consolidate the positive effects that monetary fiscal policy have had in terms of limiting the damage on the economy. At the end of the day, what we need to do is to engineer additional growth, and each country should address the issues that shows that there are gains to be made if some reforms or some strategy is pursued. And this is also important because growth cannot depend only on fiscal and monetary policy. We have used those instruments a lot, but at some point there are limits to the space of action of these policies. The key is to bring growth back and to bring back accelerated growth. That will be, I would say, the best way of achieving, a better sustainable path into the future.
Mr. Carsons, thank you very much for talking to us on In Conversation.
Thank you very much, Lynn. A real pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
On Asia Tonight, Indonesia expands nationwide COVID-19 curbs in a bid to ease the pressure on hospitals. And South Korea could return to stricter movement restrictions as daily infections surge. 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time.
เห็นไหมขายยังไงครับเอาตังค์มาเอาของไปพูดเล่น
In Bangkok, Air turns to selling chili paste after losing her cushy director job in the pandemic.
啲陳舊式係撩職咯，唔該。
In Hong Kong, Elba bends over backwards in her new job.
我好唔慣而家做嘅嘢啊，即係你以前做空姐喎。
Time to hustle. On the second episode of Make It Work, Sunday on CNA.
From the top stories in Asia
A quicker, portable way of testing for COVID-19 in just 5 minutes.
to breaking news in the US and Europe,
US President-elect Joe Biden is set to formally introduce his top economic team.
with an eye on markets opening across the world.
Wall Street's major indices all closed the month with double-digit percentage gains.
It's the one bulletin that offers you a global perspective. World Tonight, daily, on CNA.
As I live my life, I am increasingly surprised by my strength, my determination, by the power of my beliefs. I find reward in the honesty of my endeavors, proud of what I have achieved, and convinced there is much more I can do.
This is Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Newbrunner. Here are tonight's top stories. Indonesia expands COVID-19 curbs to more regions as the death toll soars. The aim is to prevent hospitals being overwhelmed. Two UMNO politicians promoted as Malaysia's Prime Minister carries out a cabinet reshuffle. This follows speculation that their party was going to leave the ruling coalition. South Korea reports its biggest coronavirus surge in months. Authorities warn tougher measures could be imposed if the situation spirals. Singapore to reopen further as COVID-19 cases slow and vaccinations climb. It's also considering more freedoms for fully inoculated people. And Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City told to prepare for tough COVID-19 movement curbs. The business hub is the epicenter of the country's outbreak.
I'm Dawn Tan. Also tonight, Sydney extends its COVID-19 lockdown by another week as the Delta variant continues its march. And the mental toll laid bare as Malaysia endures lockdown after lockdown.
I'm Elizabeth Neo with your Asia Business Update. More than $800 billion wiped off their market value as Chinese tech giants feel the pinch of a widening crackdown. Plus, Air Asia to take over Gojek's business in Thailand.
Indonesia has expanded nationwide coronavirus curbs to ease the strain on hospitals. The country is battling its deadliest wave.